As Powerlink's former Chief Executive, Merryn has graced our forum stage many, many times, so it's an absolute pleasure to have her back with us. Merryn's knowledge and experience in transmission and energy was already pretty impressive, but as Executive General Manager of System Design with the Australian Energy Market Operator, she can now add a detailed understanding of nationwide powered system planning to the list. Merryn will be sharing an overview of what's happening in energy from AEMO's perspective. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage.
Thanks, Nicole, and thanks, Paul and the Powerlink team for inviting me along here today. And it's great to be able to share a bit of what I've learned nationally and make sure that we're thinking not just about Queensland, but how does Queensland fit in more broadly, and what can we learn also from some of the national things that we're considering. Just to start, I got the wrong button. I'd also like to acknowledge traditional owners. If any of you are ever in any of our offices, we have this fantastic artwork which we was prepared in our purple and blue colours, which are our AEMO colours, for AEMO and AEMO services, and this graces our Melbourne office. It's very large, it's very exciting, and it was part of our first Reflect Reconciliation Action Plan. Just in terms of AEMO, we obviously do work nationally, as Nicole said. We also operate the Southwest Interconnected System in WA, and that's a little microcosm of a network that's really progressed and probably reasonably similar to Queensland in that there's a lot of parties, there's a lot less interjurisdictional issues, just one government, one state government that is involved over there. So we get a lot of learnings from that we try to bring back to the NEM, which is obviously a little bit more complicated. But that's just a little bit about what AEMO does. So this is, I guess, a different way to represent what Paul was talking about in terms of the variability of demand from the power system, particularly from the transmission system across the day. So we've got on the vertical axis the number of days in a year that demand from the transmission system will flow across the power system and what it will be on different times. So at one end we have a small number of days when we're up at that really peak demand, and that's something that we've dealt with over a large number of years and something we're reasonably used to. And we know it happens when there's a big heat wave, multiple days, really high humidity here in Queensland, the third day of 35 degrees and 99% humidity, and no one wants to turn off their air conditioner. Everybody know what that feels like? So we're used to that, but Paul mentioned the duck curve and the increasing minimum system load. And so that's at the other end, and we're not expecting that to occur all that frequently, but it's really different operationally, and it's something that we're not yet used to, but we will need to become used to. So a small number of days when it'll be very mild, it'll be nice and sunny, conditions will be pretty balmy, no one's got their air conditioner on. Possibly it's a public holiday, so everybody's out and about enjoying themselves, and it's sunny. And that's when all that rooftop solar is all generating all at the same time. And guess what? It's not just happening here in Queensland, it's happening everywhere, right across the NEM. So this is also a slightly different version of Paul's chart. We should have compared notes. So you have got that really broad spread that has increased over time. So that 11,005 peak that was hit and your minimum demand also hit in 2024. And you can see that minimum demand from the transmission system decreasing over time. And this one is our forecast. So you can see it's going to go negative. Negative demand from the transmission system. It's not something anybody ever thought would really happen, but it is going to happen, and it already happens in other states. So it's great that it's interconnected, but the real challenge we've got is rooftop solar is everywhere, and negative demand is going to happen everywhere all at the same time if the sun is shining all at the same time. We do get some geographic diversity, but this is a significant challenge, and Paul mentioned storage as a solution, shifting load, making sure that we're aware of this and we're planning ahead for it is really key. So that turns, I guess, to what we do in terms of planning. We look at a lot of different time horizons. So we have our system security reports, look at about 5 years. We're doing some longer term thinking about system security in terms of a 10-year outlook. We have our engineering roadmap, and we also look at the power system and gas as well from two perspectives. One is what's actually happening, what's really committed, and what investments are needing to occur to make sure we can meet supply, and that's referred to as our statements of opportunity. So what is the opportunity for investment to come along? And then we look at it from an integrated system planning point of view out to 2050, and that's really looking at what needs to happen. If we want to get to net zero by 2050, if we want to meet the state policies, whether that's Queensland policies or Commonwealth policies or a range of energy policies that other governments around the country have, what is it that needs to happen to get there? And there's a gap in between what is actually happening and what needs to happen to get to those points. And so that's where we really want to put out really good quality information to all of you good people, so you can see what might need to happen and what the opportunities are for you in terms of investment or operation or other things that will help to deliver the essential services that we need in the power system. We know there also is an engineering challenge. So thankfully, Powerlink, AEMO, a bunch of other organisations do turn their minds to these engineering challenges that we have. So whether that's thinking about what the power system's going to look like in 2050, Paul put up his kind of mix of different types of infrastructure that might be in the power system. One thing we know is that it's always going to be different to what we think it is, and that's a characteristic of forecasting. You do a forecast and you plan and you work those things through, and then you need to update that over time. So planning is a repeat cycle. We need to change things as we learn more, and that's really one of the things that our engineers use to make sure that we're not just thinking about how much energy is needed, but what are the other services that are needed to keep the power system operating, which will come from different technologies and different mix of plant than what we have historically had delivering those services. We know from a planning point of view that we need to make sure we're thinking ahead, so by the time it gets to our real-time operations and the control room on the day when it's either maximum demand or minimum demand or anything in between, we need to make sure that we're thinking ahead so that the teams in the control room have the tools and arrangements in place that they can keep the lights on for everyone, because that's super important to life, to our lifestyles, and of course to the economy. So we're really pleased to be working not just with Powerlink but with other organisations around the country to think about those engineering problems and challenges, because we know we have to solve them together. In terms of supply mix, this is from the integrated system plan. So if we think about what have we got to get to net zero by 2050, across the NEM, we go from about a 60 gigawatt system to a 300 gigawatt system. And that big increase is really driven from two things. One is the variability, so you need more capacity to deal with the variability, and you need storage and other things. But it's also driven by the energy system enabling decarbonisation of other sectors, and in particular gas and transport. So that means there's going to be more energy delivered from the electricity system to enable those decarbonisation of those other sectors. And you can see on this chart for Queensland, we go from about a 30 gigawatt system to an 80 gigawatt system. So it's a big increase. And that means there's a lot of plant that needs to be invested in, and Paul referred to that. And there's a lot of other bits and pieces that need to go with it. Transmission, of course, but also storage. And we do see a strong role for gas backup. And I'm glad to see Paul call out that there is a need for gas turbines as a backup in the ultimate power system, and we agree with that very much. Paul also mentioned the amount of investment that's happening. These are both national and Queensland figures for the part of the connection process that we deal with at AEMO. So just as Paul and his team are evaluating things coming onto the network here in Queensland, we have to have a look at how those things come onto the whole of the NEM and how they integrate with the system. So this is a measurement of plant that has achieved application, achieved their generator performance standards in terms of an accepted application to the NEM. And you can see nationally, in financial year 24, 19 gigawatts achieved that application approval. And in Queensland, that was 6.2 gigawatts. Of course, from our perspective, that's kind of the start of the connection process. I know for developers, that's probably a long way through, but they've still got to build their plant, they've still got to get it registered, and they've still got to commission that plant for it to come onto the system. But you can see that very large increase, not just in the NEM, but also really strong growth in terms of application approval in Queensland over that 2-year window. But nationally, we do need to lift that connection if we want to meet that net zero target by 2050 that is outlined in the integrated system plan. Then we need to lift from about somewhere between 3 and 4 gigawatts per annum nationally to around 6 to 7 gigawatts connecting to the system nationally. And I'm sure Queensland's going to play a strong part in that. Paul also mentioned consumer resources. So this is at the small scale. Lots of people have solar PV these days on their roof, and as Paul said, they're almost mini power stations these days. And it is an important element to the power system. It is a fantastic resource that we need to take advantage of to make sure that we are delivering not just for households, but also for the whole power system, and that it can all work together. This is a particular challenge because when we think about large power stations connecting to the power system, they have a team of people, an engineering department, and we can go and have those conversations. If we think about the scale of the collective power station on people's roofs, and we don't have an engineering department for that we can go and talk to and talk about how it's going to integrate into the power system and how it's going to operate. And so we really need to engage with that power station in a completely different way than we do with the large power stations. And we need to work through that. That comes with technical standards, compliance with technical standards, thinking about how consumers engage, how they can get the benefit of engaging with the power system. Because we all know that people have put those things on their roofs for a particular purpose. It might be because they want to decarbonise their footprint, it might be because they want to reduce their bill, it might be because it came with their house. But we need to engage with those people so that that operates really effectively with the power system. And so we've got a very large piece of engineering work, working not just with Powerlink, etc., but also with a lot of distribution companies. So obviously here in Queensland that will be Energex and Ergon, but the same applies right around the country in terms of working with distribution entities and other parties who will help with the coordination of that plant and making sure that it does operate effectively with the power system. Just lastly, while it's great to be here and there's a huge audience, I couldn't not talk about the broad range of stakeholders that are involved in the power system now. If we'd drawn this diagram of our stakeholders that we engage with, even 5 years ago, there would be a lot less boxes on this circle. But we know that there's a lot more people involved in energy, whether that's all the people in this room that have solar panels, or whether it's communities who are much more engaged, landholders who are hosting not just transmission lines that Paul talked about, but also wind turbines, engaging in solar, batteries, impacted by pumped hydro. there's just a lot more people and parties involved in the power system of the future, and we need to make sure that we are engaging with them and taking them on that journey. And we're very much aligned with the PowerLink mantra that let's get out there and talk to people and take them on the journey so that we can all deliver a safe and secure and reliable power system in the future. Thank you.